In 1930, several small islands in the South Pacific Ocean were used by the U.S. as part of the U.S. campaign against Japan. This tactic was used to avoid Japan's fortified island positions, and these islands eventually provided a path for the U.S. to invade Japan. But as the U.S. set up bases on these islands, the previously uncontacted local tribes witnessed for the first time airplanes, or to them, giant metal birds that dropped blessings from the sky. Inside the birds were white people in strange clothing, speaking a foreign language. They gave them food they had never tasted, built odd structures, and carried powerful weapons. On the island of Tanna, the Tanna people looked to the sky, and the white beings came. They did not see them as new gods, but as an extension of their ancestors or deities. The Tanna people watched and learned the drills of the U.S. military, watched them build landing strips for their giant metal birds, and exchanged goods. One day, a soldier arrived with dark skin, much like their own. His name was John from America. The Tanna people flocked to him and loved him, since he so much resembled them. They believed him to be a divine being and a messenger just for them. As the Tannas spent time with John, they followed him around the island, trying to glean what he wanted to show them. Then, one day, all the white beings and their prophet John boarded their metal birds and left. The war had ended. Soldiers left the islands and left behind natives, people who had begun to rely on them for sky blessings. Weeks passed, and then years. The Tanna people remembered the blessings brought by the giant metal birds, so they began constructing temples dedicated to their new god and prophet, John from. The language barrier, John from America, had become shortened to John from. Items he had given them quickly became relics to the Tanna people, and those relics became sacred. They patiently waited for his return, telling the stories to their children. The Tanna people built the landing strips which they knew would bring the metal birds, and even built life-size replicas of these metal birds from wood and bamboo, beckoning their god Jonfram to return the blessings to their people. The Tanna people looked to the sky for years, waiting for the prophet of the gods to return. Even to this day, there are native peoples who still look to the skies for the metal birds to return. These natives and the worship that developed around experiencing advanced technology and gifts from different-looking beings became known as cargo cults. Developed under specific conditions, cargo cults have taught us much about human behavior and what happens when an advanced people happen upon a people who live differently. It has shown us their influence changes a culture and how quickly a small object can even become sacred. Could this similar phenomenon have happened in ancient times? Could this technological gap between locals and visitors from the sky shape legends, myths, and even religion? Much like our technology appearing alien to the locals on the island of Tanna, could the same thing have occurred in the history of humanity? The islanders saw people flying in the sky and experienced the destructive power of their weapons. They recognized their seemingly godlike wisdom on how to build and do things not known to them. So we have to ask ourselves, did our ancestors experience the same thing? Could our ancestors have encountered someone or something more powerful in advance? And like the U.S. leaving the Tanna when the war ended, did those beings also leave? Could the memories of these encounters still echo in historic sites all around the world, leaving behind megalithic structures, unexplained architecture, and even art? Just what or who are the ancient gods of old, and do they still visit today? Welcome to Rebel Road. I'm Mary.
And I'm Haley. We are back, everyone, and we definitely missed you guys. I don't know about you, Mary, but spring came and she brought all of the sun with her, and I've been loving every moment of it.
It certainly has been lovely, Haley. I mean, I love winter. I really do. I love the cold and the snow. But the older I get, the more I realize how much I miss the sun when it hides behind those gloomy, dreary winter days. And as our listeners know, we took a week off last week. And thank you for coming back to listen to us again. We haven't really had time to bank any backup episodes, so we appreciate everyone who shares their time with us. There are millions of podcasts that you can listen to, so clicking play on Rebel Road Podcast does mean something to us personally, and we hope wherever you are listening from, the weather also has been lovely and the sun is shining for you too.
Or not just the sun, but possibly the moon is shining for them as well.
What?
Well, I mean, if we have some night owls out there listening to the podcast at night, right?
Oh, well, that makes sense. Yep.
Yeah. So, Mary, speaking of night, when was the last time you went outside at night? I'm talking no phone. You just walked outside, you sat in a chair, or you laid on the ground and stared up into the stars. And maybe our listeners too. When was the last time you stopped and just stood there just looking at the sky? What about you, Mary?
I enjoy the night sky. I am always looking at the stars. And sometimes, if I can't sleep, I will go outside, no matter how cold it is, and just stare at the stars. It's something that I absolutely love to do. But what about you, Haley? You asked the question, do you go outside and look at the stars?
I do. That is something that I did a lot when I was younger. My dad always encouraged us to go out and look at the stars. I actually have a tattoo in remembrance of that little memory that I have with him of the Little Dipper and the Big Dipper. I think it's something that we did more so when we were younger, going out there. I think we definitely did that more. The stars are just these beautiful mysteries. And when it's really dark and clear, that Milky Way galaxy, it just pops out of the dark and it reminds you of just how small you are. Did you ever look at the stars and try to find the Big Dipper, Little Dipper, or the Milky Way?
I do, and I still look for them. It's like I don't know, it's like a reflex memory or something. Can I still find it? And I still can. But I do know what you're talking about when it makes you feel so small. There's just something magical about a little star filled sky.
Yeah, there really is.
Now, I don't think I ever looked at the stars and wondered, though, hey, are aliens out there? I mean, did you ever think that when you were looking at the stars?
I didn't. I think that's something that has come as I've gotten older or we've gotten older. I think growing up, it's really just admiring the beauty and just how grand and massive it was, but didn't think about life specifically in the stars. But I think that takes us to maybe bigger conversation.
Absolutely. I mean, I watched Star Trek when I was younger, also with my dad, and I loved it. I mean, I am hands down a big Trekkie. I prefer Star Trek to Star Wars. But Haley, have you ever watched the new Star Trek movies, the new reboots? Have you ever watched those?
I have not watched those. I also was forced to watch Star Trek with my dad, but I am not a Trekkie and I am also not a Star Wars nerd. But tell me about it, Mary. I know you got all the info
I
about all
do.
things Star Trek.
I do, but I was just thinking about the prime directive in Star Trek, how it prohibits them from influencing or intervening in the natural, cultural, or technological development of an alien civilization they encounter, particularly those who have not yet achieved warp drive. So that would be much like our natives that were in those cargo cults. And there's a scene from the rebooted movies, the ones with Chris Pine and Carl Urban, and I think it's the Star Trek Into Darkness movie, but they are trying to help a world that is going to be destroyed by a volcano. So they hide their big ship deep into the ocean and then, they sneak into the volcano and try to fix it. Like always, something goes wrong. And so they break that directive and they burst out of the ocean and the natives see this ship bursting out of the ocean. And when they witness that, the away team is also beaming up, and they see these people vanishing as well. And so at the end of that opening scene, and I can't remember if they bow to it or not, but one person kind of circles everybody around him. And you get a sense that it's a priest or something. And he begins to draw the ship in the dust. And you just know that they're starting to form a story or a narrative and possibly a religion. The Enterprise has influenced their culture in a crazy way that just know is going to develop with them.
I think maybe I'll check that movie out with Brandon. Maybe I can get him to watch it with me. But let's go back and look at these cargo cults from the opening. From the sounds of it, Mary, it's literally the same scenario. And cargo cults are a real thing. Let's make that clear. We can trace them back to when flying actually became more popular. So the early 1900s. And with the cargo cults, we have a more technologically advanced human coming into the location of a simpler people. And sometimes they spend time with them and they teach those simpler people a few things. Then, when the visitors are done with whatever they're there to do, they leave the natives behind. And what impact does that have on those that are being left behind? It does obviously reshape their culture and their beliefs. There's no arguing that. And with that, they've learned something that maybe they wouldn't have. They've learned by either witnessing or by participating in whatever quest the visitors were doing while they were there. Zachariah Stitchin proposed that the Anunnaki were an advanced extraterrestrial race from the planet Nibiru who came to Earth some 450,000 years ago simply to mine gold. And according to Stitchin's interpretation of Sumerian texts, the Anunnaki needed gold to repair their atmosphere and essentially created humans using genetic engineering to serve as miners. Now, that is a loaded scenario. Most do say that Stitchin translated incorrectly, but the Sumerian texts, they do mention the Anunnaki and their quest of gold. Look at the Nazca mummies, which we've been talking about in the last couple episodes, along with the laboratory idea of genetic tinkering. And then you add in fallen angels and Nephilim. Let's blend that with a cargo cult type situation. Is this what may have happened or something similar to this in those ancient times? I'm not saying we were made by fallen angels or Anunnaki, but the idea falls into line with stories all around the world. So the big question is, who or what did come to our known world? Was it a different race, the Watchers, the Anunnaki, or maybe even something else? And that's a big question, Mary. I don't think that we could even have an answer to that.
I don't think we can definitively answer that.
That's the episode, folks. We don't know. We'll end here.
Right? Spoiler alert, we don't know. But we can discuss a few things and maybe shine some different perspectives on the question of those so called alien visitors from our past. But Haley, you're right. What or who they were? I mean, what is it that even makes an alien? Maybe let's start there. What is an alien?
Oh, okay. Well, the definition of an alien is what? Let's look it up. An alien by definition is a foreigner belonging to a foreign nation or land. And that is why we call some people illegal aliens. That doesn't mean they come from space, but they're just in a land or a kingdom that they don't belong to. And so let's look. What is the definition of an ET or extraterrestrial? I think we are still calling them that. We can go down that rabbit hole later. But what does the word terrestrial mean? So it's of, on, or relating to the earth. So extraterrestrial means of or from outside the earth or its atmosphere. So basically, it's like extra land. It is someone or thing that comes from a place that is not known by us. And that's very important. It's by us. And we can get super technical with NBEs, but let's just stick with our basic ET. So again, extra lands, foreign to what we here on our world know. So not just space. This could mean that they come from several options, but let's say inside the earth. Reptilians, that's another rabbit hole and topic that we could go down. But reptilians, they say, are inside the earth. And we do have the Hopi people and their tales of the Anu or the ant people who saved them from the flood. We've mentioned that in some of our other episodes. But on that, the Hopi people mentioned that they came from the sky. Hollow Earth, again, we've mentioned this in our other episodes, but if we're talking about Hollow Earth, that would not be a common land we know. Or if we want to go really wild, let's think about the lands they say are outside the ice wall. Those are foreign or alien lands, such as the Hyperboreans. The Hyperboreans lived beyond the north wind in the far north of the known world, and this is mythical. The race is sometimes associated with beyond the wall narratives.
Excellent points. The word alien doesn't always mean from space. It could also possibly be something from a different time or dimension. Basically, there are aliens all over the world. And don't worry, we're not going to get into the physics and engineering science of time travel or pockets and dimensions today. Soon, maybe, though.
Yeah, like CERN. We're working on an episode about CERN, and I cannot wait for that one. There's so many different levels and aspects to talk about when it comes to CERN.
Did you know because of CERN, that's why we have the internet?
That is a debatable one. There's so many different rabbit holes.
They created the internet. Their scientists there wanted to be able to communicate their findings in real time. So that is how the internet started there in the 80s. Lots to dig in with the CERN and the Hadron Colliders, like you mentioned. Anyway, let's get back to the weird complexity of aliens and what are they?
Well, I think the term alien, it does conjure up different thoughts for different people. And I don't think anyone's first thought, I could be wrong, but I don't think most people's first thought is where did that alien come from? At least not for me. I first think, what does it look like? What did it look like? And for me, when I say alien, I do think of probably more so of what we were sold as children in the movies growing up. I do think of smaller, 3 to 4 feet tall grays. I don't think of little green people. I do think of the little grays, bigger head, big eyes. That's what I think of. Or the xenomorphs from the movie Alien, another example of what I think of. The alien punching out of the woman's stomach on the movie Alien. I also think about that. But also, too, as I have gotten older and been exposed to more and several different rabbit holes, I do think of reptilians, and we can definitely expand on that in another episode. But that is only on the back end that I might be like, wait, where did this come from? And that is I keep saying a lot of rabbit holes, but specifically on the reptilians, a lot of different rabbit holes that we could go down.
I think it's just so funny to me. If somebody said alien to me, the first thing I would think of would be where did it come from and what does it want? You know, our different personalities are showing there. Our personalities are what shape the world. And that's why there's just so many, I think, different explanations for aliens and what are aliens or advanced species, whatever they are. But they did shape our world. Did they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they continue to shape our world, our culture, our beliefs. If we just look at the phrase sky people, and we've used that term a lot on the podcast, specifically with our Nazca episode and our alien mummy episode. So if our listeners miss those, be sure to go back and listen if you haven't. But Mary, do you know how many cultures we can find that mention sky people in their past? There are hundreds. Yep, hundreds. And they all have a common story. And it is celestial beings descending to earth, teaching humanity, and then simply returning to the sky. We find these themes in Native American history, the Blackfoot, Cherokee, Hopi people. We even see it in the Aboriginal people in Africa, Asia, Egypt, and European cultures. Sky people are really everywhere. Now, the Bible, it does not specifically say that angels came down and taught man. The Bible just says there were angels that fell. But the book of Enoch, which is found in the Ethiopian Bible, it does. And in the book of Enoch, you will find the watchers who descended to earth that taught humans forbidden knowledge, such as metallurgy, weapon making, herbs, magic, and even language or writing language. And we see that parallel with all these other ancient people stories. So, bringing the Bible and that viewpoint into our alien visitor narrative, could ancient aliens or even modern aliens be fallen angels? Which some again called the Anunnaki, that here among humans became gods and deities.
I agree, Haley. There's that common thread of stories throughout all of humanity on origins and how we advanced as a race. And I do personally, I lean towards the ancient advanced people that showed up here on earth were fallen angels. That's just me personally. You know, we touched on them in our Nephilim episode and angelology episodes.
I may be steering us off track, but if the ancient aliens, quote unquote, were fallen angels, does that change any dynamics for those who believe the Bible? I know most Christians kind of reject the idea of aliens, which is a little odd to me because creation is creation. I mean, why do we think God would have only just created us?
That's a good thought. I think because the Bible doesn't specifically mention the word alien in terms that we could use, and that troubles Christians because they can't take a stand on it. So it can't be true because it's not in the Bible. Well, that's kind of not true. There's a lot of things that we know are true, but they're just not mentioned in the Bible, yet we know they're real. So I think Christians would be more comfortable with aliens being fallen angels rather than them being an entirely different species of creation coming from somewhere else. But I can't speak for millions of people, but I think the idea of aliens being real does make people very uncomfortable. And when for your entire life you're only taught one narrative in your belief system, and pastors don't teach about aliens, at least not of any church that I've gone to. They teach God created one planet and one species of people, and so they tend to forget that angels are in that creation story. And with that story we have the fallen that blended human DNA with angel DNA, again like the Anunnaki, creating unclean genetics and corrupting God's work. And from those hybrids, I think we get everything else we kind of know about or wonder about, such as the demons, the monsters, the giants, the cryptids, and even possibly our aliens.
And to our listeners, we are just having a discussion about what we think based off our own interpretations from personal research of the different books, the Bible, scientific evidence, and honestly, the ancient sites that are left behind. I mean, I've heard Christians who say aliens are demons, and we have a different view on what demons are. But if we're bringing genetic manipulation into play, then who is to say those gray aliens that seem malicious, or we could even say a different type of alien, aren't just a type of soulless meat suit that a disembodied spirit or the dead Nephilim may be inhabited. And if you haven't listened to our What Are Demons episode, I highly recommend you do. Mary, actually, I re-listened to this one last week. I think if our listeners were to go back and listen to that episode, the content here might make a little bit more sense.
We're just mentioning all of our past episodes today. We've covered some really good stuff, I think. And oddly, or maybe not oddly, it just kind of all works perfectly together if you've been following us along from the beginning. And you're right, Haley. Unfortunately, people will argue and go back and forth on what aliens are. And in the scientific community, they will dispute ancient sites as proof of advanced beings here on Earth. They're just going to say, no, that never happened, instead of just allowing the evidence to speak for itself. And that is what we try to do here on the podcast. We just want to lay it out and encourage our listeners to dive into the areas a little bit deeper. Maybe we'll say something and you're like, oh, I wonder what that is. Write it down and go research it later on your own. We just try to be a launching point for people to use their own critical thinking skills and to start looking outside of what we've been told and taught all our lives and for centuries about our history. We have been lied to, and it is more than we know. It's been covered up, it's been hidden. Get off the social media, get off your TikToks and your 15-second things that you think, okay, now you know. You don't know. Go find some old books and really start putting pieces together.
I feel so attacked about the 15-second TikTok. I love it. I'm always trying to send Mary TikToks and she says,
No, I am
"Get out of
anti
that.
TikTok.
Get that away
I
from
am
me."
anti TikTok and I will be anti TikTok forever.
Okay, now everyone knows who's running the TikTok social media account for Rebel Road Podcast.
It
Okay.
is Haley. It is Haley.
All right. Well, let's look at a few ancient sites that could point to advanced visitors. And the most popular one of all, let's go to ancient Egypt and let's pick the pyramids. We don't know what they were for. And the pyramids of Egypt, they align with Orion perfectly. They are aligned perfectly with north, south, east, and west. They align with the sun, and that is just where they were built. We aren't even getting in to how they were built, which, let's face it, no one really knows. When you look at the pyramids, logs and water, not happening. Not even with a slave army. The blocks on the inside, those are made from granite, which was quarried like 800 kilometers away. And for us folks in the United States, that's 497 miles away from the building site. These blocks, they weigh between 25 and 80 tons each. And I know the kids these days are not learning math, but let's go a little modern. 12 to 16 cars is about 25 tons. And so if you think about that, 80 tons would be about 48 passenger sized cars. That's for one brick, moved almost 500 miles at a time. Now, the Great Pyramid has 2.3 million of these stones. And
Yeah, that's a lot of water.
yeah, now let's use our brains. With no modern methods, no modern way of transportation, they're just using chisels, water, and logs. And these are precise cuts. That's not there's no chance. Someone helped build them or someone else built them with technology that is foreign to us. And by definition, that makes it alien.
Absolutely. And not to mention the city that they found below the Great Pyramid. I mean, that was recently discovered. Remember the big news when they found those shafts that they were like, whoa, what are these shafts that we've just found underneath the Pyramid of Giza? This was recent, like in 2025. Well, now they say that they found a hidden underground city that is underneath those shafts. So these pyramids, they're just getting more and more bizarre as we, with our technology improve, we're discovering more and more about them. And we just have no idea what they were for. The best conspiracy guess is that they were giant power plants. The piezoelectric elements of these pyramids are just astounding, but they could be multifunctional, such as part of an observatory network, or even they could have been used as ancient libraries of sort. Not to mention the resonance chambers that these pyramids have. These chambers amplify frequencies and even maintain frequencies under right circumstances. And we know that for sure because people have tested that. Frequencies, they carry information. So they carry healing and energy. But something else that a lot of people don't realize is frequencies also carry data. So some say frequency is how all these ancient sites were built, and we've just lost that technology. And just look at the architecture pyramid, the pyramid architecture, the four sided pyramid. They're found all over the known world, built by different civilizations at different time frames. But how, when it all kind of mirrors the same style? How did very distinct civilizations all have the same ideals of architecture? Did they have the same visitors? Or were they influenced by the same sky people, those same sky people visitors? In Egypt, there's also the Saqqara bird artifact. Now, this little bird just sat on a shelf in a museum forever until a scientist actually looked a little closer at it. And he was very curious. And the study of this miniature model, it kind of looked like a toy. Its design, it suggested that ancient Egyptians may have had knowledge on how to build gliders. Yes, could they have been able to fly? I've said that before in a past episode that I think people in our past did have knowledge on how to fly. And we also know that Egypt traveled to Australia and they would visit the Aboriginal people there. And they did this because they wanted to share knowledge and wisdom. And the two civilizations love to share their sky world stories. And we know this because there's hieroglyphs found in Australia. There's actually a tomb of a prince who had died while traveling there. He was bitten by a poisonous snake. And, Australia, I'll never go there. It's dangerous. All of those stories are real. But Egypt also has boomerangs. Boomerangs are found in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs and in their artifacts.
Well, let's also not forget King Tut and his dagger. King Tut's dagger is a 14th century artifact found in 1925. And I always think about the things that we learned growing up and how it seems through maybe Mandela effects, things change over time. But I encourage everyone to kind of think about what you know on King Tut and then start exploring and doing some research and what maybe has changed on that. But
His
the
headdress is different.
his headdress is different. You are correct.
Don't
But
get me
back
started.
back to that dagger and that artifact that was found in 1925. In 2016, it was confirmed that that dagger was forged from an iron meteorite. Its high nickel and cobalt content distinguish it from a terrestrial iron. And it kind of reveals that it was crafted from a meteorite or a space rock, and the dagger was likely crafted using both cold and hot working techniques, which would have been outside of Egypt's capabilities. Egyptians did not widely work with iron at that time. So this item was considered, and I'm quoting here, air quotes, iron from the sky. And that's highly valuable, divine material. The blade is paired with a gold handle featuring a rock crystal pommel and a gold sheath decorated with lilies, feathers, and a jackal head. And who made that for King Tut? That's the question we're asking. And where did that come from?
We could stay on Egypt for over a month or even longer and not even scratch the surface of all the advanced technology or the little subtle things that we can find with the ancient Egyptians that all point to some sort of a visitor or there was something else going on there with the Egyptians. So let's move on. And if we move on, let's go to Bolivia and Pumapunku. Now, this is an even wilder sight than the pyramid. Here we find megalithic blocks with precision corners, drill holes that are at precise angles, and even routed grooves in these stones. They're extremely hard volcanic rocks, and inside these routed grooves, there are smaller drill holes that are placed precisely, and nobody knows how they did it. People go there and they study them, and with the tools available at the time that these have been dated to, there's no way they made it. There is no way. And just another little crazy thing about Puma Punka is the stones are interlocking. They have these H blocks and smaller pieces, which are characterized by sharp, straight edges, and they have interlocking joints. And some of these stones are 100 tons. Now, we talked about the 80-ton stones that were in the pyramids. These are 100 tons. And how did they move them? Again, they have no idea. But recently, they speculate that these rocks were melted down and then they were cast to give them these unique shapes with the routed grooves and these H formations. Okay, well, how did they do that? And how did they know that they could melt down this volcanic rock? And how hot did that this is volcanic rock. How hot did that have to get to be able to melt and to pour into these forms that they said that they made? And who taught them how to make forms? This is a different type of architecture than we see anywhere else in the megalithic structures. But where did that knowledge come from? How was that built?
Yeah, I think we could, like you said, Mary, spend a month on ancient structures. And that's just it. The evidence is there. They have not been able to hide it, obviously, but they do try to dismiss how all of this was made. And folks, some of us are buying it instead of just honestly saying, there's no way less advanced people than us built this.
Right. I mean, I agree with you there, Haley, completely, because even today, we cannot replicate what we are seeing. We have no idea how it was done. So, how did people with less advancement do it?
Yeah,
There's
isn't
no
that
way.
something? Isn't that something like it here in the modern world? It takes 4, 5, 6, maybe 10 people to fill a pothole, and then we're looking at how massive these structures are, and
R-
again,
Right.
less
And that
advanced people.
and that pothole, it falls out the next winter and has to be done again.
Okay, well, let's move on. And if our listeners, if you want to learn more about ancient sites, go watch that show, Ancient Aliens. You will hear Mary and I talk about this. It's on Netflix right now. Just go check it out. Then follow up with your own research because on Ancient Aliens, they do push the alien narrative and they kind of pull God out of that, just kind of giving everything to just aliens. But here, Mary and I, we like to keep God in the mix. That's what we do. Every time we look at something, aliens, whatever they are, and for whatever reason, by God's design or rebellion, did shape humanity with our architecture and technological advancements. And it's probably, we have to admit, still doing that today. If we move away from the giant, unexplainable structures and maybe let's just focus on the smaller, unexplainable artifacts like the King Tut dagger or the Dropa stones allegedly found in China, along with the graves containing small, large headed skeletal remains. There's a lot out there.
Our alien Nazca mummies, small, large
Exactly.
headed remains.
Yeah. In 1962, there was a researcher who translated some inscriptions and they told of alien visitors who could not repair their ship and they had to adapt to Earth. Now, the stones were a collection of 716 ancient circular discs that were reportedly discovered in 1938 within caves in the Bayan Mountains, and that's on the China Tibet border. They're said to feature spiral grooves and hieroglyphs, and they are considered a myth or a hoax, but are they? There's some very specific information on these, again, air quotes, not real disc.
Right. And with the spiral grooves, that kind of makes you think of a record.
Yeah, good point.
Maybe they used frequency to play those stone records. But one thing that I love about that story that you just talked about the Dropa stones, is it's interesting because it mentions a crashed ship. Now, aliens most always seem to be associated with a flying craft of some kind. And we have ancient tales of chariots of fire and flying deities on carpets and metal birds that link back always with the sky people. So, ancient people, we say this all the time, they were not dumb. They knew when something was unique and when something was different. So a fiery chariot in the sky used language that they had available at the time to describe something they didn't know, like our cargo cults and the metal birds. A chariot was what they used as transportation. They knew what a bird was and they knew a bird could fly. So they put a chariot, which was their transportation, and flying in the sky together. And we got fiery chariots, flying fiery chariots.
That again makes you ask some questions. For example, do angels need spaceships? Don't they just maybe float down from heaven? I think about that. That's a conversation that most people aren't having on a day to day, is how do you travel in the spiritual realm? Is there some kind of portal? We don't know. These are great questions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm laughing at it because they are good questions. They're really good questions. Why do we assume that they don't have spaceships or need some sort of mode of transportation? Why do we assume that they don't? The Bible again, it just kind of says that they descend and they fell and some just appear. But could that be like a Star Trek and a transporter type technology? Who's to say? But to dismiss something because it's not clearly specified, I think we need to be more open. And good science does nothing more than explain just how miraculous our God is. And the more we learn, the deeper we understand the complexities of this world and life on it. So we have no idea about other worlds or other realms. But back to those spaceships, say angels use them or other species. We don't know. But UFO and UAPs are real. Our government just clearly said so. Now, are they tech reversed engineered by other countries or just our own advanced technology that for some reason we don't want people to know that we've developed on our own? Or are these things actually carrying aliens?
Well, we do know UFO sightings have been around as long as cultures have talked about sky people. Just again, look at cave drawings and depictions, or even some ancient carvings. Some of those temples that we've talked about in some of our episodes. It's like a laser made these carvings. It's like 3D printed on a massive scale. But let's also look at religious artwork and even some classic Renaissance artwork. Curiously, there are what we would call UFOs in these works of art. So, again, let's ask, why did they paint that?
Well, we know why, because they saw them. And back then, people weren't quick to dismiss what people said they saw. They were more open to what we in modern times call paranormal or weird things. They didn't dismiss events that they saw with their own eyes. They painted them, they wrote them down, they told stories, they carved them into the stones. Unlike today, where we have been so conditioned to think that we ourselves personally are crazy if we saw something that it's not real. I have to keep that to myself. I don't want people to think I'm crazy and put me into some sort of an institution. It's all turned around and flopped. And it's become some strange mission to keep people from realizing that UFOs are kind of a regular occurrence. It's part of our world. Are UFOs nefarious? Maybe. probably, but I do think they are real, and I do think they've been around amongst us for as long as we've been here on Earth, if not longer. And throughout time, they've just been influencing humanity, good or bad, in a way. And let me just say this again for me personally, acknowledging the existence of aliens and the existence of UFOs, it does not shake my faith in God or Jesus. God is a creator God. And I think he delights in us when we, as humans who are made in his image, create. So maybe our elder siblings also create. We just don't know specifics.
We absolutely don't. Did you know the Vatican owns observatories?
Yes, I did.
Why do you think they have a vested interest and keep their eyes on the stars and in the skies?
Think because they know things we don't. I think they've hidden information. And I think they know what aliens are and they track the movements. And I also think that they could be looking or waiting for something even more specific. And that's just me, though.
I don't know. Those are good theories. I just wanted to rile you up a little. I thought it was strange. They owned a few. I don't think any of the Baptists do, but the Mormons also own one. And they openly believe in extraterrestrial life. Their theology holds that God created worlds without number, populated by his children. Some members may personally believe in UFOs or alien visitations. There's no official church doctrine on extraterrestrial spacecraft or alien beings.
That's interesting to me. I think most religions are either close to aliens or very few may take a stance that there's a possibility that they could exist. And it would not disprove Christianity, but widen the scope of God. And this would be aliens as a different species from different planets, not primarily as aliens are fallen angels or angels who operate in the kingdom of heaven.
We didn't really touch on aliens being actual aliens from other planets or even other lands. I think we took more the Anunnaki fallen angel approach in today's episode and ran with it. What do you think, Mary? Could aliens be foreign beings?
I don't know, Haley. What do you think? I mean, I try to stay open and at the same time, very close to reason for me. It just lends to beings operating in this world and the spiritual world, which I do believe are all connected. Now, if somehow space is linked to the spiritual realm and other worlds through like quantum fields and interdimensions and stuff like that, then absolutely aliens can come from other spaces. But if they're just coming from like outer space through space to our Earth, I don't know about that.
Yeah. I think there could be foreign aliens. Again, when we start talking about what we've been taught and believing only one narrative, when we go back to what we mentioned earlier, is why are we the only creation that God created? And maybe there is other creation out there, but I also think there's something in that spiritual realm. And it's all working together. And I think over time, when you start to admit that maybe you don't know all of it and you be open to the possibilities, that is maybe when you start to experience those things. But, Mary, I have a final question for you. Have you ever seen a UFO?
I have not, Haley. You know, I thought I saw one once, but I think it was just a plane flying really high up in the clouds. And to be fair, I've never really looked for them. Like when I go out and I look at that night sky, I am just admiring God's handiwork. Now, I was in New Mexico with some friends and I love New Mexico. Have you ever been there? If not, put it on your list. But they have road signs there with cows getting beamed up by UFOs, and it's hysterical. But we did a night star tour, and I did a photography tour, astrophotography, and none of us saw anything. All we saw was the beautifully lit up sky with zero light pollution. It was amazing. But at the same time, we weren't looking for aliens. We were just enjoying the beauty of it. So, Haley, you asked the question, have you seen a UFO?
I have not seen what I think people would classify as the standard UFO. I have seen something odd in the sky that came towards me, but maybe that's just a different story and topic for another episode. But UFOs specifically, I don't think I have. But, Mary, I would be curious to hear also from our listeners and if any of you guys have seen a UFO. Or if you'd like to share that story with us or even be a guest on the podcast, definitely send us your story via email. It's at rebelroadguests@gmail.com. And we'd love to hear your story. You can send it anonymously if you'd like. But I think, Mary, are we done talking about our views on ancient aliens?
Think so. I mean, we could dig in on every little segment we talked about today. There's just so much, and we just kind of skimmed over everything. But with the new Steven Spielberg movie coming out, The Age of Disclosure, Trump's announcement to release UFO files, and then you have that Project Bluebeam that's kind of on everyone's mind. And I thought maybe a little perspective on aliens and what they could be helpful for some people who might be fearful of aliens. And I hope we've just given you a little peace of mind that whatever aliens are, just hold fast to Jesus. Our history may have been changed, by alien influence and for nefarious reasons, but God remains the same. And in every moment and in every situation, He's always there with us.
Yes, he is. Well, there you have it, friends. Our take on what aliens could be. And as always, if you liked this episode, would you please share it with a friend or your neighbor or even the one guy at the gas station that wears a weird alien t shirt all the time? And if you haven't, and while you're scrolling through your social media later, and maybe you remember us, could you please hit that 5-star review button or go to our website and click send us a text? You can leave a review or even send a comment our way.
And actually, you can now leave us a voice message by clicking that. I think it says send us a fan mail now. So that's a fun new feature.
That is fun. And we really enjoy getting the messages from folks. Again, two normal gals. Well, I don't know. I don't know if we're normal or not, Mary, but we're just two normal gals on a little podcast that's gone global and seeing messages and listeners even in Paris. So we see you guys. We love seeing that and we appreciate you. So, Mary, what are we doing next week? Are we doing anything Eastery? What's the word?
Well, I don't know if Eastery is a word, but I like it. But we'll be back next week for a slightly Easter-inspired episode, maybe. I don't know. But we're going to be talking about the case for Christ by looking into the Shroud of Turin.
Well, I think Eastery is a word, and I think that's going to go perfectly. Can't wait for that episode. It's going to be so good. But for now, everyone, check out those stars tonight. Maybe you'll see a UFO. And remember, keep it weird and pull it back to Jesus.
Bye.
Bye.